Somewhere inside the largest dam America ever built, 6 men are still down there. So are 2 draglines, machines the size of small houses. They went into the Fort Peck Dam on the same afternoon, in the same 10 minutes, and not one of them ever came back out. It is the 22nd of September, 1938, just after 1:15, and 34 men are standing on a slope that is starting to move underneath their boots. They do not feel it at first, just a settling, like the ground is exhaling. Then the railroad tracks tear open, and the entire upstream face of the dam swings out into the reservoir like a giant gate somebody just shoved open. The men go with it. The machines go with it. And 86 years later, they are all still in there. Let us take a look at what really happened that afternoon, because the story you have probably heard about Fort Peck is wrong. There is a version going around with a bulldozer operator named Frank Morrison, who feels the ground give way and gets buried alive in his Caterpillar in 90 seconds flat. Good story. The problem is, Frank Morrison never existed. No such man appears in any report, any newspaper, or on any grave marker. What actually happened is slower, stranger, and a lot sadder than the made-up version. So let us go back to that morning, before anybody knew. The Fort Peck Dam, out in the Badlands of northeastern Montana, wasn't just big. When they finished it, it was the largest dam of any kind on the entire planet. Nearly 4 miles of earth and sand held back the Missouri River, and it contained 125 million cubic yards of fill. To this day, it is the largest dam in America by volume, and the largest hydraulically filled dam this country has ever built. That word matters, hydraulic. Instead of trucking in dirt and packing it down, they pumped a slurry of water and soil up onto the dam through enormous pipelines and let it settle into place. At the peak, more than 10,000 men worked this site around the clock. This dam was so famous, it landed on the very first cover of Life magazine in 1936. Now, on the morning of the 22nd, something was off, and the survey crew caught it early. A pipeline running material up onto the dam was sitting about 30 inches above the core pool. It should have been 4.5 feet. That's nearly 2 feet of settling nobody could explain. They took more readings at 3 different stations along the slope. Same answer everywhere. The whole face was quietly dropping. So the district engineer called a meeting for 1:15 to figure out what to do. That meeting never really happened, because right around the time the men were gathering, the core pool started to settle. Slowly at first. Here's why this was so dangerous, and why nobody saw it coming. The dam wasn't sitting on solid rock. It sat on a layer of shale, and running through that shale were thin seams of bentonite, volcanic ash, that turned to clay over millions of years. When bentonite gets wet, and you press down on it hard enough, it stops behaving like rock and starts behaving like soap. And they had just stacked 230 feet of waterlogged fill on top of it. The water trapped in that clay couldn't drain away fast enough, and the pressure built until the clay lost the ability to hold anything up at all. Engineers measured it later. The bentonite's strength came in at just under 9 degrees. During the slide, it dropped to a little over 4. In plain terms, nothing can stand on a slope that slick. Not a man, not a machine, not a dam. But none of them knew that yet. As far as the men on that slope knew, the ground had held for 5 years, and there was no reason today would be different. If a story like this one matters to you, the real one, the verified one, not the made-up version, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. It tells us these stories are reaching somebody. Now back to the slope. The settling sped up. The water in the core pool was not rippling. The whole surface was just dropping, like someone pulled a plug underneath it. Then the cracks came. Long fissures opening up about 30 feet below the crest, running through ground that was supposed to be packed solid. The railroad tracks started to bow. One man later described a 6-foot bend appearing in a rail that had been dead straight a moment before. The night shift had actually reported water gurgling up through the gravel the evening before, but nobody understood what it meant until right now. And then the entire upstream face began to move. Not shake, move. A wedge of earth 1,700 feet wide swung out toward the reservoir, hinged on the east end like a gate on a post. This happened over minutes, not seconds, which somehow makes it worse. The men had time to understand exactly what was happening to them, and almost no power to stop it. Dredge pipes 8 feet across snapped like dry sticks. Railroad cars loaded with gravel tipped over and spilled. A pump barge floating in the core pool tilted hard as the water drained out from under it, and the men on its deck jumped for whatever looked solid. The sound was not a crash. The men who lived through it said it was a long, low groan, the noise of 5 million cubic yards of earth giving up. And this is where those 2 drag lines come in. Out on that moving slope sat the heavy machines doing the work, drag lines the size of small buildings, their booms swinging over the fill. As the ground turned to liquid beneath them, there was nothing to grab. They tilted, they sank, and the earth folded over them. 2 of those giant machines, a pump barge and a string of tractors, went down into the slide and were never pulled back out. Picture a machine as tall as a house simply disappearing into the ground it was standing on. Some of the men ran for the crest, trying to reach ground that was not moving. There was a car up on the dam, carrying a major, and his driver, a man named Eugene Tourlotte. Tourlotte felt the shell of earth start to slide out from under the wheels, slammed the car into reverse, and drove backward at full speed off the moving section. He outran the slide. The men in that car lived because of it. 34 men were caught out on the moving mass when it went. And here is something the made-up version never tells you, because it is less dramatic and far more human. Most of them survived. 26 of those 34 rode that wedge of collapsing earth all the way out and walked away. Some hurt, all breathing. The ground carried them like a raft and set them down. The slide pushed so far out into the reservoir that the moving earth formed its own island in the lake. By around 1:25, 10 minutes after it started, the earth settled and went quiet. No more grinding, no more snapping steel. Just the wind across the Missouri and men shouting the names of the ones they couldn't find. 8 men didn't come out, and this is where we have to be careful and honest, because these were real people with real names, and they deserve better than a fictional bulldozer driver. They were Oliver Booker, a laborer in his late 50s, John Johnson, 25, who ran a motorboat, Walter Lubinge, 29, a drill runner's helper, Archie Moyer, 26, a deckhand, Douglas Moore, 35, an associate superintendent, Dolphy Paulson, a laborer in his 50s, Albert Stozer, 23, another deckhand, and Nelson Vanstone, 31, a foreman. Not one of them was a bulldozer operator. The dramatic image of a man entombed inside his machine is just not true. These were boat crews and laborers and a foreman, men doing ordinary jobs on an extraordinary day. Crews worked through the afternoon and into the night, probing the settled earth with steel rods, listening, digging wherever they thought a man might be trapped. About 100 men searched that scene over and over. They recovered 2 bodies, Moore and Stoser. The other 6 were never found. The material was too unstable, too deep, and eventually the search was called off. 6 men were left where they fell, somewhere in the eastern section of that dam, along with the machines that went down with them. The investigation brought in some of the sharpest minds in the country, including Arthur Casagrande, one of the founding fathers of the entire science of soil mechanics. 9 experts. And here's a detail that tells you how genuinely hard this was to explain. 2 of those 9 refused to sign the final report. They couldn't all agree on what had happened. The official conclusion was that the shale and the bentonite seams simply hadn't had the strength to hold, and that part of the slide may have turned the fill itself into something close to liquid. Years later, Casagrande as good as admitted the careful wording in that report had been a compromise between men who didn't fully agree. What they did agree on was this: the hydraulic fill method, the very thing that built Fort Peck, was too dangerous to keep using on dams this size. After Fort Peck, the country essentially abandoned it. An entire way of building died on that slope. But they didn't abandon the dam. The Missouri still had to be controlled, and the country was still in the Depression and still needed the work. So construction stopped for just over a year while they redesigned the whole thing. Flatter slopes, a wider base, a buried wall of steel sheet piling, relief wells to bleed off the water pressure that had killed it the first time. On the 11th of October, 1940, the last load of fill topped the dam, out at 250 feet. It held. It has held ever since. The reservoir filled, the generators came online, and today, Fort Peck still controls floods and makes electricity for much of Montana. The lake behind it runs 134 miles. The dam works. It has always worked, but it's also a grave. Somewhere in the eastern fill, 60 feet down, 6 men are still there: Bucher, Johnson, Lubin, Moyer, Paulson, and Vanstone, and the 2 draglines went down with them. There's a memorial near the dam with the men's names on it, under a single line: "Forever entombed in the dam." It doesn't mention 90 seconds or a man named Frank Morrison, because none of that ever happened. It just lists the names and the date, and the plain fact that building something this big sometimes costs more than money. And every time the Missouri runs through Fort Peck, every time the lights come on in a house in Montana, it's running through the largest dam in America, a dam that 2 machines and 6 men became part of. They went to work one September afternoon, and they never left. They're holding up the wall. If the real story moved you more than the fake one ever could, that is exactly why we do this. The verified version, the actual names, no invented heroes. Hit like if you would rather have the truth, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from.